Hello. Um, right. So, hi everyone. I'm Natan Arnold. Um, and I'm a current student here at Satsui, and I'm finishing my year in a few days. So it's a great honor to be able to give a cheerful with you. So the topic I'm going to discuss is wine because a lot of us like wine, but but alcohol is not always positive. And so I want to explore whether wine is viewed, how wine is viewed in halacha and from various stories in Tanakh and the Talmud, and what our attitude towards it should be. Um, sorry. So the first story we see involving wine in Tanakh is pretty negative. After sorry, one moment. Right, so after the Mabul, when Noah comes out of the ark, the first thing he does is plant a vineyard and get drunk, um, and then expose himself in an indecent manner. Now, you could argue that this wasn't entirely his fault because sure he got drunk, but the actual act of humiliation wasn't it wasn't he didn't humiliate himself. His son came into his tent and saw his father in a way that he shouldn't have. But Rashi nevertheless attacked Noach on this, saying that he shouldn't the first thing he planted after he came out shouldn't have been a vineyard. He should have planted a different crop. Um, but although Rashi also notes the unusual spelling of the word acholot in this pasuk with a hey at the end rather than a vav, suggesting this alludes to the exile of the 10 tribes, which refer to some as or that the area is referred to as acholot, is the say essentially refers to this due to their misuse of wine. So far we haven't got a great impression of it. Um, the next the next time this occurs is in the story of Lot. Straight after straight after Sodom is destroyed, um, Lot's daughters Lot and his daughters are hiding in a cave, and basically his daughters think that they're the last two people left in the world, and so it's their responsibility to repopulate the entire earth, according to Rashi's explanation of the words "V'ish ein ba'aretz." Um, and so again, so you could say it's not you can't so much blame them for what they did if they thought that they had to recreate the entirety of humanity. And it's all Rashi also points out that the reason Ramban notes that technically the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach allow this, but society still views the actions very much as repulsive, and so possibly one of the reasons that Lot's daughters got him drunk first was to spare him the embarrassment of knowing that this has happened to him. Um, but despite the you can make excuses for it, it's also that it's interesting to note one of the results, and that one of the sons who was produced from this was Moab, who in the future was ruled by Balak, who attempted to destroy the Jewish people. So it's interesting to note that even if the actions may seem justifiable at the time, it leads to potentially negative consequences. Um, and so in a similar vein to these two stories, and also to link to this week's Parshat Hashua, um, the Gemara in the first Amazon Masechet Sota asks what the connection is between Nazir who abstains from wine and the Sota, a woman who undergoes the strange rite of Mei Hamarim Hama'aravim, the bitter waters which cause curse, to find out if she has illicit relations. And the answer that the Gemara gives is that the horror of observing this procedure will cause anyone who sees it to be put off wine, because wine loosens inhibitions, causing sexual transgression, which is the cause of this happening. Um, Now, the next two stories I want to discuss are the story of Nadav and Avihu, who died after bringing Eish Sarah, strange fire, into the Mishkan. Um, into the Mishkan, and sorry, yeah, they brought Eish Sarah into the Mishkan without being told by God. and they died. And after the connection to wine here isn't immediately obvious, but the psukim following this, so Aharon and his family are told not to mourn for his two sons, and then God gives the Kohanim the issue of entering the Mishkan while intoxicated. And so the Midrash brought where Rashi explains that their deaths were punishment for ignoring this. And the other story I want to discuss is the Gemara in Megillah, which is quite a famous story. So Rava, who notably was a student of Rabba and Rabbi Zera, teaches the famous or possibly infamous halacha that a person should get drunk on Purim until they don't know the difference between Aruch Haman and Baruch Mordechai. And then immediately after this, the Gemara brings a story of Rabba and Rabbi Zera where they get so drunk at their Purim so that Rabba gets up and kills Rabbi Zera, at least according to the simple reading of the text. And then the next day he begs God for mercy and he brings him back to life. Now, everything I'm about to say about these two stories is based off of a Purim Sikha from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The first thing he points out is that Rabbah, one of the great Amoraim of Bavel, how could he possibly have spilled the blood of another Jew? Like that's just absurd. So clearly we can't read this story completely literally. It's also you should also note that when Rabbi invites Rabbi Zera back again for Sukkot the next year, Rabbi Zera doesn't say, I'm worried that you might kill me again. His worry is that there might not be a miracle that will bring him back to life again. And this really isn't the sort of reaction you'd expect from someone who had previously been killed by his host. But the Rebbe refutes this idea of not taking the story literally because the Gemara is bringing this story as support for a halacha, and so it must be an accurate account of real events because you can't base a halacha off an agatha about spiritual ideas. And so yes, we must indeed take the story literally in some sense, but you certainly can't say that Rabbah spilled the blood of Rabbi Zera in a traditional sense. So to understand this, we'll look at the incident with Nadav and Avihu. So the Midrash explains that after their deaths, Moshe tells Aharon that he knew the Mishkan would be sanctified by the death of a great person, and had assumed it would be either himself or Aharon. But now it was clear to him that since it had been Nadav and Avihu, the two of them were greater than either himself or Aharon. So, given this information, the question arises: how could Nadav and Avihu possibly come to sin like this, to go into the Mishkan while drunk? So the Or HaChaim explains that they were hoping that the strong connection that they had to God would cause their aim was to reach such a strong connection with God that their souls would depart from their bodies and become one with God. And this is further hinted at by the pasuk at the start of Parashat Acharei Mot, which reminds us of this incident. So the pasuk says, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe acharei mot shnei bnei Aharon b'korbatam lifnei Hashem bayamutu." This is usually translated. I mean, God spoke to Moshe after the deaths of the two sons of Aharon when they brought an offering before God, b'korbatam lifnei Hashem. They brought a korban bayamutu, and they died. But instead, we can use the more literal translation of the word b'korbatam, and leave the pasuk to say that they came close to God. They came so close to God that they died. And so, what does this have to do with them being intoxicated? Now, the Gemara in Eruvin, this is also quite a famous Gemara, it connects the word yayin, meaning to the word sod, which aside from literally meaning secret, also refers to the deepest and most mystical level of understanding of Torah. And so just as physical wine reveals what's hidden in the heart of a person, so too the wine of Torah means the revelation of the hidden ideas of Torah. And intoxication creates such an overwhelming revelation of the secrets of Torah that the soul can no longer remain in the physical body, just as drunkenness causes the loss of physical senses. So, what was wrong with Nadav and Avihu's actions? Why were they sinful? What was wrong with them wanting to leave the world and become one with God? So Chazal and Pirkei Avot state that we live against. I haven't got that. So Chazal and Pirkei Avot state that we live against our will. That we were created. Our neshama doesn't want to be in this world, but God put us here. And we want nothing more than to leave this world with all the challenges and cling to God instead. But God created us here. God created us in the physical world because He wants us here. He wants us to have. He wanted to have a dwelling place in the physical world, and we can't create that if we too do not inhabit the physical world. However, we still can't discard the simple meaning of the Pesukim. We must still say that as well as experiencing revelation of Torah, Nadav and Avihu did also become physically intoxicated. And so the Shalah explains that holy people become intoxicated at great feasts with intentions to shame Shemaim. because when they drink, they become less constrained, like any person. But when this happens to a wise person, this causes them to reveal Torah more than usual. Happiness strengthens the attribute of thought in the soul, he says. And so when Natan and who drank and became physically intoxicated, it caused them to become more receptive to the sequence of Torah, to the extent that their souls departed from their bodies. So the Rebbe now applies these ideas back to the story of Rabbah and Rabbi Zera. When they drank together and received the hidden secrets of Torah, Rabbi Zera's soul was unable to handle such revelation, and his soul departed. Rabbah, however, was on a high level, and so he could handle this and remain in the physical world. And this is even alluded to by their names, that Rabbah means great and Zerah means small. And also the language of the Gemara is also very precise here. So come, when it says come Rabbah, it doesn't just mean he got up. He was elevated. His spiritual level was elevated, and in a sense, he did indeed kill Rabbi Zera because he thought that Rabbi Zera had a similar level of understanding to himself, and so he tried to bring him up to his own level and reveal everything he had seen. But Rabbi Zera was unfortunately not capable of handling this. And so when Rabbi invited Rabbi Zera back the next year, he was hoping that Rabbi Zera had grown spiritually and could now comprehend the exceedingly great level of godliness that he would be exposed to. But Rabbi Zera responded that he hadn't yet reached the same level of Rabbah. So the reason that he's not worried about dying, because it would be incredible to have this same spiritual experience again, but he doesn't want to be taken away from the physical world. And so it seems so far that wine is a very powerful tool for becoming close to God, as long as care is taken not to go too far and depart from the world completely, because God wants us in the world. But the Gemara in other places talks more scathingly about its effects. The Gemara in Eruvin teaches a halacha that one who has drunk a bit of wine, which is not a huge amount, although there are some who say that the wine that Chazal had was maybe stronger than what we had. Someone who's drunk this amount of wine may not give a Pesach halacha. And so Rav Nachman tries to reject this on the grounds that he claims to himself a small amount of wine allows him to think more clearly. But his argument is shot down on the technical grounds that, because immediately before this he praised a different halacha by the same by Rabbi Huda in the name of Shmuel, and now he's rejecting this one, and so Rava says that he can't do this because of the pasuk that says you shouldn't say some bits of Torah are nice and some bits are not nice. And so Rav Nachman's argument isn't accepted, and he retracts his statement. And a bit further down the same Amud, the Gemara notes the negative impact of wine on tefillah, even in small quantities. Because if one has drunk any amount, it says they can't pray that it's a valid prayer. But one who's intoxicated, and there's a discussion later on in the Gemara what that actually means. It actually says that that one who has drunk a bit is one who can still talk before the king, and one who is intoxicated is one who can no longer talk before the king. Although that's kind of a circular definition in relation to this halakha here. So it says, contrary to what we saw earlier, that wine can bring closeness to God. Here the Gemara seems to say that prayer while drunk is disgusting in the eyes of God and mustn't be done. And so to return briefly to Tanakh, have I got my sources in the wrong order? I have. Yeah. Okay. So return briefly to Tanakh. We have this pasuk in Kohelet, and there are similar statements in Tehillim and Mishlei. It directly equates wine to happiness. Although the statement that money alters everything is certainly not a simple one to understand, and definitely not the subject of this year. And back in the Gemara, there's another example of wine being portrayed very positively. With the Gemara comparing, that's this one. Here we go. The Gemara comparing one who's intoxicated to one who shares the mindset of the Shurim Zakenim, and even God himself. And that's the Gemara that comes immediately before the one we looked at earlier. And it's the Gemara also says here, this one very long sugya in Eruvin from the post Zafim Samotal and Zamachez has a lot of stuff about drinking. And so it says here, like, free availability of wine in a person's house seems to be a source of bracha, and it's also interesting that could possibly be an allusion to the fact that a number of brachot and mitzvot are done with a cup of wine. in particular Kiddush, Haftalah, Birkat Hamazon. Um, so one final Gemara from this sugya in Eruvin says that so a person's character can be ascertained from three things: the koso, his cup, which how he acts when he drinks; the kiso, his pockets, which is his financial contact with other people; and the kaso, with his anger. So aside from being phrased in a very catchy manner, this Gemara introduces an important idea. Not everyone reacts to intoxication in the same way. So for some people, it may induce happiness and cause them to spill secrets of Torah. For others, it may lead to dishonesty and ill temper. And so it seems overall, our attitude to wine shouldn't at all be constant and unchangeable. Um, for precise technical matters such as rule and halacha, and also tefillah, which, despite being spiritual in nature, is done according to a fixed formula. So for these things, a person's mind must be completely clear. But for Talmud Torah lishma, such as in the story of Rabba and Rabbi Zera, and for achieving a connection with God, alcohol may indeed be a powerful tool, but should always be used with utmost caution because any person could be susceptible in acting in a bad way that they would never do while sober. So that's all I've got to say on the topic. I'm sure that there is plenty more out there on this. Um, I suppose I should probably plug the fundraiser. I'll post my link in the chat. Um, and yeah, thank you very much for listening.